I'm going to invite up our next presenter, Justin Bush with the Washington Invasive Species Council. Thank you so much for being here today, Justin.
My pleasure. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you and I can see you, and your slides look great.
Fantastic. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. It's my honor to represent the state of Washington at the summit here today. I'll be speaking about Washington's Interagency First Detector program that unites all organizations to detect and stop all types of invasive species. I'm hopeful this will inspire you if you're someone new, and if you already have a First Detector program, I hope it gives you some new ideas. My name is Justin Bush, and I'm the Executive Coordinator of the State of Washington Invasive Species Council. The Council is tasked with improving coordination of state invasive species activities to ensure that the investments made today are the right investments for the future. Invasive species impact our economy, they impact our environment, they impact our health and well-being. The Council considers aquatic or terrestrial plants, animals, insects, or diseases, including things that are present in the state of Washington or things that are on the horizon. So the Invasive Species Council and many invasive species councils are tasked with thinking about invasive species that impact our economy as well as our environment. In the state of Washington, we can put some numbers to the problem. In 2017, a state study assessed the potential economic impact of just 23 invasive species in one single year if they were not prevented or controlled. And that scenario equates to 1.3 billion in damage and loss to agriculture, water infrastructure, and timber. So astronomically high numbers. This is really a call to action. Washington is many coastal states, has many bustling ports of entry. We work closely with federal agencies who protect our borders and keep invasive species from entering our nation as well as our state. The state of Washington is a leading producer of fruit and vegetable crops. We have over 36,000 farms, and together they produce more than $10.6 billion of products annually. And many of these commodities are shipped domestically as well as internationally. So we're very concerned in the state of Washington about giving invasive species as well as receiving invasive species. So it's a dual-edged sword in our case. And we're also very concerned about our urban forests that are adjacent to our ports of entry. They provide numerous benefits to our communities, are often the very first areas that are impacted by new invasive species. Washington also offers exciting opportunities to experience nature. We attract visitors from around the world to our numerous national parks, our national forests, our trails, our wild and scenic rivers, and wildlife refuges. Outdoor recreation in the state of Washington contributes over $21.6 billion annually to our state's economy. This industry supports more than 200,000 jobs. All of these public lands draw people internationally as well as domestically to experience our national landscape as well as the outdoor activities that it offers. I think you can see here that we face a significant challenge as we face both threats to our economy as well as our environment, both internationally as well as domestically. To prevent these impacts, the Council, many invasive species councils, work to break organizational silos, and they provide a forum so that agencies and stakeholders can collaboratively set and share successful approaches, set policies. The Council brings together all the organizations that have a role in invasive species prevention, management, or research, such as tribal nations, state agencies, federal and local agencies, industry, researchers, and conservation partners. Every organization has a slightly different mission, but the Council unites all, looks at the bigger picture, and then fills gaps that cannot be filled by one individual organization. The Council and partners work together to develop and then implement a comprehensive statewide strategy that sets the compass for every organization in the state of Washington. One cornerstone of our strategy is prevention. If we can develop and then implement policies as well as programs that prevents the introduction and movement of invasive species to new areas, We can then focus our attention on managing the invasive species that are already present in our landscape and are fairly widespread. So you can see here, for example, we partner with local agencies to install boot brushes, and we also work with organizations to implement watercraft inspection as well as decontamination. So when prevention fails, we often then work to find the very first weed, pig, or giant hornet nest, and we seek to swiftly respond to the problem with the management goal of fully eradicating the population from our state. In the state of Washington, we believe that new introductions of invasive species are an emergency, and we will respond to them as such. This has been illustrated by organizations such as the Washington State Department of Agriculture with their successful response and eradication of citrus longhorn beetle, a relative of Asian longhorn beetle that was found in Tukwila, Washington, and we successfully eradicated it from our state in 2006. We have many other examples, both at the local level, as well as things that are ongoing that may lead to an eradication in the future, such as giant hornet that you see pictured here. So when we can't eradicate something, our strategy then pivots, and that then focuses on containment as well as control, long-term control. We use regulatory processes and quarantines to prevent further spread of invasive species. We also develop long-term, sustainably funded programs to control the species, as well as to protect high-value assets, such as national parks or critical habitat for conservation species. We know how to stop and control invasive species that are widespread on our landscape, but it takes long-term commitment and the resources to do the job. We have evidence of this success through many different programs in our state. The number one that comes to mind is our eradication program for Spartina, which is an invasive grass on our coasts. And in the past, we had Spartina grow to a high level that was impacting our oyster beds as well as our mudflats. And in 2003, which is the peak of our infestation, we had more than 8,500 acres solid of Spartina across a footprint of over 20,000 acres, which is a massive amount. And through sustainably funding and diligence with processing toward an eradication, today the infestation totals about 1 solid acre of Spartina. But the trick is that it's spread over that 20,000 acre footprint. So we can do this, but it takes the resources to do the job, is the key message. So you may be asking yourself, how does this relate to first detectors and EDDMapS? Well, aware members of the public are the backbone of finding and reporting invasive species in Washington. And I want to give you one great example, focusing specifically on insects. So since 1990, 70 different introduced insects have been found in Washington for the very first time. We had researchers with the Washington State Department of Agriculture and Washington State University work together to analyze those detections and try to figure out exactly who was finding these detections for these species for the first time. So researchers reviewed every detection and they categorized how each species was detected and classified the type of reporting party that found that species for the first time. So 28% were detected through targeted trapping by entomologists. So Department of Agriculture staff or Department of Natural Resources staff deploy traps all over our state, and they might be seeking a specific target like spongy moth. And when they catch a spongy moth in that trap, that's targeted trapping that is successful. So in hanging traps and searching for that target, they found 28% of those first detected species. 20% of those first detections were detected as bycatch. So if you hang a trap for spongy moth and you catch a giant hornet, for example, that would be considered bycatch. So if you total that up, that's 48% that are being made by professional entomologists with the goal of finding new species. So we can contrast that 36% of those reports were found by private citizens, aware members of the public that spotted something that didn't belong or seemed like a problem, and they reported it. And then 16% of those reports were found by non-regulatory biologists. So imagine that you're out doing a fish survey And while you're hiking a stream looking for fish, you spot some insect that you don't recognize. You think it may be a problem and you take a photo and report it. That would be a great example of where those reports came from. So my point is, if you combine those last two, that's a total of 52% of those first detections. They were found by first detectors, whether they were trained members of the public or they were cross-trained professionals. And so I think for all of us, this should really be a call to action to mobilize your community and to help the professionals detect and then report those invasive species. So prior to 2015, the council had a reporting app. It didn't have an educational program to go along with it, and not surprisingly, the app was underutilized. Each organization in Washington with a need for a first detector program had started their own program, developed their own outreach materials, were doing their own workshops, and there really was no consistency across programs. The council looked at our application and looked at all these different programs, and we formed a citizen science initiative led by the agencies and universities on the front lines in protecting our state's natural resources and economy from invasive species. And together, we partnered to develop harmonized tools, curriculum, messaging, and communications that can be shared across each first detector program. This new program is really just a thread that binds each first detector program together into one comprehensive portfolio. So the premise is really simple. You don't have to be an entomologist or biologist to participate in our network. The majority of our network members are everyday people who keep their eyes peeled for the signs and symptoms of high priority invasive species, and then they report them to the agencies that have some response capabilities to aid in our rapid response. We ask people to keep an eye out when they're in their yard, in their neighborhood, or enjoying everyday outdoor activities. We ask for people to be aware and to report what they spot. It's really simple and easy, and we've developed a comprehensive training around this message for professionals, for youth, for adults around our mobile application. And our mobile application functions as a digital field guide as well as a reporting tool. So we really have been successful in recruiting a lot of different people. Do you recreate outside? Do you appreciate hunting, fishing, or hiking? Do you take your family to a state or a national park on the weekend? Do you like to picnic or boat? Do you have friends that have trees in their yards? Do you have a garden? Do you have farms? If the answer is yes to any of these, and for most of us, there's yes to a few of those, I'm sure, then you have a great reason to participate in this first detector program and to protect our resources and our economy. So this message of if you see something, say something is woven into outreach materials produced by the council or produced by other organizations in partnership with our council. We want to reach everyone in our state, so the whole community. And we want them to employ various approaches to reach that whole community, including brochures and signage. These types of educational materials are distributed outreach events, they're mailed to target audiences, or they may be integrated into community and visitor centers statewide. So awareness is our #1 goal. How do we teach someone to recognize a problem through identifying the target? So what does a feral pig look like? Or learning the signs and symptoms which may indicate a problem, such as damage or hoof prints. Goal #2 is teaching someone how to say something if they see something. And we worked with our first detector programs and partners, and we developed resources and guides such that you see here to help reporting parties collect information and capture photos that will help us determine if there's a problem. We've focused on front loading the training so that we can get better initial reports. We'll have to do less follow-up. And then if we find something that's actionable, our response is quicker. And a primary function of the Invasive Species Council is identifying and then filling gaps in policy and programming. So it wasn't too long before we realized we needed to reach youth. This work is ongoing, but we did a global review of existing curricula that existed across the whole world. We reviewed those, we included elements from those that we liked, and if something didn't exist, we developed something ourselves. And the final product is what you see here. It's a series of 6 different lesson plans that meet new generation science standards. So this means that teachers actually can use our curriculum and it meets the things that they're required to cover in order to use it in the class. That's been a huge point for us. We've also held teacher workshops annually where we bring teachers together and we provide them an incentive to participate, which is clock hours, kind of like recertification credits for teachers annually they must receive. And so we're bringing them and we're teaching teachers to implement our curriculum. So rather than council staff or council members reaching every teacher, we are training the trainers so they can then go reach the students with our messaging. It's been very successful and we're very proud of it. So beyond all that, we've also integrated our reporting tools into many policies, plans, and manuals such as that you see here. Here you see a tool for cities called our Urban Forest Pest Playbook. Local jurisdictions or counties or tribal nations have this assessment tool where basically they can self-assess their readiness for new tree-killing insects. And then based on that score, there are actions and resources to help them become more prepared. And integrated through all of this is our reporting application as well as that response process. So here you can see the outcome of our Interagency First Detector program. Prior to 2015, we didn't have great record keeping, but I expect that the very first bar that you see would be common to the past. Washington State's Noxious Weed Control Law actually was passed before Washington was a state. In 1881, Washington's weed law was passed to fight the spread of Canadian thistle. And our law has progressed since then. So I would expect that most of our reports would have been weeds in the past based on that long history that we have in our state. You can see that when we implemented our First Detector programming across all agencies in 2016 and beyond, the diversity of those reports starts to increase, which is really neat to see. And then also you can see the total overall numbers increase. So one invasive species might be a gateway drug to learn about more, I guess is what I would say with that. I wanted to talk a little bit about Tree of Heaven and Scotch Brim, but I'm going to save the Tree of Heaven discussion for a later summit. So in 2020, the council tried something new. We did what we called the Great Scotch Brim Census. So in Washington, Scotch Brim is one of the more common invasive plants. It's quote unquote everywhere. However, that isn't really useful, right? And I think we heard this earlier. How can we guide researchers, managers, and start to get funding and programs from decision makers if we don't actually know the situation on the ground? And so what we did is we asked every member of our state to take 10 minutes and search their communities for Scotch Brim during the blooming season and then report it. And in that 1 month, we received more reports in that single month of Scotch Brim than we did in the previous 3 years. It was phenomenal. And I think there's something that we can all learn from that. So this was a watershed moment for us in Washington. We realized that the public really understands our issue and they really want to help. But the trouble is that they may not understand how to help us. And so we realized is that we needed to do better outreach to tell our story as well to engage the public to explain to them what happens when they file a report. And we're currently considering how to do this for other species, but we have also done it for Tree of Heaven in 2021. So part of what we've learned through the years is that we need to better inform our first detectors about the wide range of management actions. When something is reported, the response is rarely the same based on what the species is, where it is, all the different components such as ownership and funding and etc. So we needed to set better expectations as well as to communicate the victories of those outcomes. And if we don't show value to those first detectors, it's really unlikely that they're ever going to file a second report. So here you can see an example of outreach and how we focused on prevention. We received a report of goldfish being illegally introduced to our waterway as part of an informal outdoor curriculum. We then did an investigation. We educated the teachers that they should not be doing this based on our laws. We then took that message and put it on social media, which reached over 1,000 people, and it also was picked up by media as well, so we can't really capture that. But rather than just fixing the problem for that one group of people, we've now educated more than 1,000, and they will not be introducing goldfish to our waterways, which is a huge victory. Sometimes a report may lead to rapid response actions. We may not always immediately go fuel up a helicopter when we get a report, but sometimes we do. And in some cases, in the case of this, we had pigs, both of male and female of different sexes and age classes, illegally released onto a national forest. Over time, they would have reverted to feral tendencies, and the green band you see is our national forest system on the map. Could be a feral swine superhighway between British Columbia and Oregon. So you can see that we did respond, we did eradicate that population, and then we verified that with monitoring. And it was really amazing to see in a 2-week period of time they've been there, how much damage they'd already done to a wetland, as well as the surrounding terrain. So not every response has glamorous response actions. In many cases, public reports are of something widespread. This isn't a management priority for the state or the federal agencies in many cases. In this instance, we work with University Extension to educate the landowner or the land manager how to safely, efficiently, and effectively manage their own problem. So there's always some kind of follow-up, but it always looks a little bit different. We can contrast that with, on the other hand, our first detectors may find something of national or international significance. The best example that you see here is a late 2019 report of Vespa mandarinia, which was the very first verified report of giant hornet in the United States, as well as the state of Washington. This initial report led to unprecedented national and international interest, and our eradication program is ongoing. I suspect we'll be successful, and I hope that you never see these things. So really, in closing, we all know how to prevent and stop invasive species, but it takes all of us working together to be successful. In our case, everything that we do is built around the EDDMapS system, which powers our mobile application. And I hope that our experiences have inspired you through viewing this. My message is that we can do this. If I can do this, that certainly means you can too. So thank you for your time and your attention, and I'll pass it back.
All right, thank you, Justin. Outstanding presentation. Next